Remember that weird little plastic cat you had to plug into your computer just to open a website? Or that chunky pager you wore like a badge of honor, even though it only showed numbers? That was the 90s, a time when every kid thought the future had arrived. But looking back, a lot of them were just bulky, confusing, or didn't last. These are 1390s tech gadgets that seemed cool but totally flopped. Let's get into it. Number 13, Palm Pilot. Before everyone was glued to their smartphones, there was the Palm Pilot, the original "I'm too busy for this" gadget. Launched in 1996, it looked like a tiny computer made just for adults. You could check emails, take notes with a skinny plastic pen, and pretend you were running a Fortune 500 company even if you were just planning your lunch. There was no real internet, just a clunky system where you had to plug it into your computer with a thick cable just to move stuff around. And writing on it? You had to learn this weird squiggly handwriting system called graffiti. One wrong move, and suddenly your name turned into a math problem. Then there was the stylus. It always went missing. Always. You'd find it a week later under the couch or stuck in your backpack's weird side pocket. Still, back then, having a Palm Pilot meant you were serious. But when real smartphones showed up with keyboards, real internet, and no silly squiggles, the Palm Pilot got kicked to the back of the drawer and never came out again. Number 12, Sony Aibo. You'd think a robot dog would be the coolest thing ever, and in 1999, it kind of was. Sony's Aibo looked like it came straight out of a sci-fi movie. It could walk, sit, bark, and even recognize your voice. No fur, no barking at the mailman, just a shiny metal pup that followed commands. Sort of, but owning one felt more like babysitting a glitchy microwave. It cost nearly $2,000, which made people ask, why not just get a real dog? And for that price, you didn't get much. Aibo didn't fetch, didn't cuddle, and its version of playing was spinning in place and blinking at you like it was waiting for Wi-Fi. It responded to voice commands, but only if you said them perfectly. Otherwise, it just stood there like a confused Alexa with legs. Stairs? Forget it. One wrong step and your robot dog was a very expensive doorstop. And when the battery ran out, it flopped over like a broken toy soldier. It was ahead of its time, sure. But it also proved that no gadget, no matter how smart, can replace the joy of a wagging tail and muddy paw prints. Number 11, QCAT. In the early 2000s, someone at Digital Convergence had an idea. What if you could scan barcodes in a magazine and instantly open the website on your computer? That's how we got the QCAT, a gadget shaped like a plastic cat that plugged into your PC. You'd scan a special barcode printed next to ads in newspapers or catalogs, and it would launch the brand's website in your browser. Sounds futuristic, right? Except no one asked for it. People didn't want to sit at their desks with a barcode scanner just to visit RadioShack.com. It felt clunky and invasive. And then it got worse. Turns out the QCAT secretly tracked your activity, linking scans to your personal info. The backlash was quick, and so was the downfall. Magazines stopped printing the barcodes, people tossed the scanner, and QCAT became the punchline of every failed tech joke. These days, it's mostly remembered as a weird footnote in internet history and proof that just because you can digitize something doesn't mean you should. Number 10. Nintendo Virtual Boy. Nintendo's Virtual Boy promised virtual reality before anyone even knew what that meant. Launched in 1995, it looked like a futuristic headset, complete with a red visor and a clunky stand. But instead of immersing you in a 3D world, it mostly gave you a headache. Literally. The graphics were red and black. No colors, just red lines floating in darkness like a haunted Etch-a-Sketch. The 3D effect was supposed to wow you, but it mostly made your eyes hurt after 5 minutes. And you couldn't even wear it on your head. It sat on a table like a tiny arcade machine, so you had to hunch over and stare into the void. Games were limited, the experience was uncomfortable, and the whole thing felt more like a sci-fi prank than a gaming revolution. Nintendo pulled the plug within a year. The Virtual Boy wasn't just ahead of its time, it was completely out of step with what gamers actually wanted. Number 9, Motorola PageWriter 2000. Before smartphones gave us texts, emails, and apps in one place, Motorola thought it had the answer, the PageWriter 2000. It looked like a chunky pager, but when you flipped it open, it revealed a tiny keyboard and a grayscale screen. Suddenly, you were typing out emails like some kind of secret agent, assuming you had the patience. This thing was slow. You couldn't just send a message, you had to go through multiple steps, wait for it to connect, and pray it didn't crash halfway through. It had a stylus too, but it barely worked, and the whole setup felt more like solving a puzzle than writing a quick note. It also came with a steep price tag and a bulky belt clip that made you look like you were carrying a mini fax machine on your hip. People who had it definitely felt futuristic for about 5 minutes. Then BlackBerry showed up and made the PageWriter look like a toy. In the end, it was a cool idea trapped in clunky tech. It wanted to be the future, but all it really did was prepare us for what came next. Number 8, Sony MiniDisc player. In the mid-90s, Sony looked at cassettes and CDs and said, let's make something cooler. Enter the MiniDisc. It was sleek, it was rewritable, and it came in little plastic cases that made you feel like a secret agent loading up audio files. For a minute, it felt like the future. But here's the problem. Nobody needed it. CDs were already everywhere, and MP3s were just around the corner. Minidiscs cost more, and the players weren't cheap either. Plus, converting music onto a minidisc required a clunky process that involved your computer, special software, and a ton of patience. And let's not forget the record function. Sure, it was there, but half the time it glitched, froze, or cut your track in half. In the end, minidiscs were too niche to survive. Cool concept, bad timing. Another example of a good idea getting completely buried by better ones. After that, they became cluttered at the bottom of every kid's drawer. They didn't just flop, they taught an entire generation what it felt like to be let down by technology. Number 7, Nokia 8210. The Nokia 8210 was supposed to be the future. It came out in 1999, and for a while, it felt like the future. It was tiny, colorful, and had no antenna sticking out, which made it look way cooler than all the bulky phones around. And of course, it had Snake. That one game turned boring bus rides into full-on competitions. Everyone wanted one. If you had it clipped to your jeans, you were winning, but let's be real. Once the hype wore off, it didn't actually do much. No camera, no internet, no music, no apps, just a tiny black and white screen and a keypad that made texting feel like cracking a code. You'd spend 5 minutes typing out, "Hey, what's up?" and another 5 fixing typos. It had this infrared feature where you could beam stuff to another phone, but only if you lined them up like they were kissing. And if you wanted a new ringtone or wallpaper, you either paid for it through a shady magazine ad or gave up entirely. The battery was great, but that couldn't save it, because once flip phones and color screens showed up, the 8210 just looked old. Fast. It went from being the coolest phone in the room to the one you left in a drawer and forgot about. Still iconic, but totally outdated. Number 6, Sony Discman. In the 90s, CDs were the big thing, and Sony was ready. After their huge Walkman success with cassettes, they dropped the Discman, a shiny round CD player that looked like something from a spaceship. The promise? Music on the go. The reality? Not quite. The Discman had one major problem. It skipped like crazy. If you bumped it, tilted it, or even looked at it funny, your music would glitch out. Jogging with it? Good luck. You'd hear your favorite song for maybe 5 seconds before it started skipping like it had stage fright, and calling it portable was generous. It was big, clunky, and didn't fit anywhere unless you had giant jacket pockets or a dedicated backpack space. On top of that, it went through AA batteries like a hungry monster. Sony tried to fix it with anti-skip tech, but it didn't help much. You still had to walk like you were carrying soup. Still, back then, having a Discman meant you were cool. If you pulled it out on the school bus, especially with your favorite CD in it, people noticed. You just had to sit perfectly still if you wanted to actually finish a song. Number 5. Beepers. There was a time when the coolest thing you could do was clip a pager to your jeans and pretend you had urgent business. Beepers or pagers were originally meant for doctors, paramedics, and actual professionals. But by the early 90s, they'd somehow become the unofficial badge of teenage cool. If your beeper went off in the middle of school, instant attention, even if it was just your mom. Here's how it worked. Someone would call your beeper number from a landline, punch in a code or their number, and your beeper would flash that info on a tiny screen. Then you had to find a payphone, call them back, and hope they were still waiting. It was basically texting, but with 3 extra steps and a whole lot of running around. For a while, it felt revolutionary, but when cell phones took over, beepers became a punchline. Kids today wouldn't even know how to use one unless they've played a time travel game set in 1994. Number 4. Compaq Concerto. Long before the iPad, Compaq tried to invent the tablet. In 1993, they released the Concerto, a laptop with a touchscreen and stylus that could detach and turn into a tablet. It looked like something out of Star Trek, and for a second, it seemed like Compaq might have cracked the future. But reality hit fast. The screen was unresponsive, the stylus barely worked, and it ran on Windows 3.1, which wasn't exactly optimized for touch. Every task felt like trying to operate a vending machine with mittens on. It was heavy, buggy, and the battery life was laughable. Plus, the detachable keyboard didn't always sync correctly, so sometimes your commands just vanished into the ether. The Concerto aimed high, but landed face first. It's remembered today as one of the earliest stumbles in tablet history, and a warning that form without function doesn't impress anyone. Number 3. Gizmondo by Tiger Telematics. If you've never heard of the Gizmondo, that's because it flopped so hard it barely made a dent. Launched in 2005 by Tiger Telematics, the Gizmondo was supposed to be a gaming handheld, GPS navigator, camera, and music player, all in one. It cost $400 and looked like a BlackBerry with big dreams. The hardware was decent, but the execution? A mess. The game library was tiny, the interface was clunky, and the marketing was all over the place. One model even came with ads that played in exchange for a cheaper price tag. But the real kicker was the scandal. Turns out the company's execs were involved in everything from fraud to ties with the Swedish mafia. One of them even crashed a Ferrari into a pole and fled the scene wearing a disguise. Not even kidding. The Gizmondo tanked in under a year. Most people never even saw one in real life. It's not just a failed gadget, it's one of the most bizarre tech stories the 90s laid the groundwork for. Number 2, LaserDisc players. Before DVDs, streaming, or even Blu-rays, there was the LaserDisc. It looked like a giant CD, seriously, the size of a dinner plate, and it needed a special player just to work. You couldn't just pop in a movie and relax. You had to flip the disc halfway through and sometimes even switch to a second one. Watching a movie felt more like operating heavy machinery. The picture quality was better than VHS, but that's where the wins ended. The discs were huge, scratched easily, and took up way too much space. The players were expensive and loud, and the remote controls had more buttons than your TV. It felt high-tech, but in a way that made everything harder, not easier. LaserDisc was supposed to change home movies forever. Instead, it ended up in the homes of people who loved gadgets a little too much, like your rich uncle who also owned a pager, a car phone, and probably a wine cellar. Finally, at number 1 digital pets that weren't Tamagotchi. Everyone remembers Tamagotchis, but what most people forget is how many weird knockoffs showed up right after. Suddenly, every toy store was packed with digital pets. Some were puppies, some were dragons, and some were just random. There were off-brand aliens, robots, even a virtual blender you were somehow supposed to feed. Every company wanted in on the craze, and what we got was a flood of noisy, confusing little keychains that beeped nonstop and broke for no reason. They looked like Tamagotchis, but that's where the magic ended. The screens glitched, the buttons barely worked, and the sound effects were loud enough to drive your parents crazy. Some pets randomly turned into monsters. Others were supposed to be educational, but you just end up pressing the same button over and over. Even if you tried to take care of them, they'd still glitch out or die for no reason at 3 a.m., usually when you were finally asleep. For kids who couldn't get a real Tamagotchi, these knockoffs promised the same fun, but gave you a headache instead. These 13 gadgets might have looked futuristic, but most of them crashed harder than dial-up on a stormy night. So which one did you have? Or wish you didn't? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic times like these.